All right, so we're in. Let's give a couple of seconds for additional people to trickle in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Yep, people are still coming in. All right, so we do have a lot to discuss in this webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and get us going. All right, so hi everybody out there watching from around the world. Today is day 2 of CubeWise Innovation Week, a week where that is dedicated to bring CubeWise and our friends from around the world to share some of our insights and latest experience with planning analytics. As my general manager, James Downey, put it yesterday, it is in our DNA to want to share this information to further increase the value that the whole planning analytics community is getting from their investment in the platform. In yesterday's webinar, we talked about Power Connect, which is a CubeWise solution that tightly integrates planning analytics with Power BI. Tomorrow, we will discuss the newest offering from CubeWise called Atmosphere, which is essentially is a library of pre-built functions as a service to do things like report bursting, integration with Snowflake, Workday, retrieve FX rates from various sources. So tomorrow, you guys will see Marius's handsome face again. On Thursday and Friday, we'll be talking about DevOps and faster data processing techniques. So on Friday, you'll see my face again. And I think that is a must-see webinar because we're going to ask the question, how fast is fast enough? We know the answer is it's never fast enough. And you guys will learn about a lot of techniques to achieve faster data processing and planning analytics. So with that, go ahead and get started. My name is Jason. I'm a technical account manager based out of the CubeWise US offices. I'm also joined by Shane, who is my go-to really for everything that's MDX and Python related in my region. He's a CubeWise senior consultant based out of the US offices. Also, we have Chris Wetzel, who is just like me, is a technical account manager. He's going to be monitoring questions in the chat. So if you guys have questions as we're going, feel free to post in the chat, and Chris will bring them to our attention. We also have Marius. I'm not sure if I even have to introduce Marius, but he's the father of TM1py. We're lucky to have him on this call. And he's a friend to us and then a very important colleague. And then last but not least, we have Ryan Clapp, a member of the TM1py Council and senior leader at within Amazon's enterprise performance and analytics sort of area. I think the first time I came across Ryan Clapp was maybe 3 years ago in Miami with, during a conference that we were hosting. And I remember after lunch, kind of huddled in a corner with a bunch of smart people, including from IBM. And I believe he was showing how he's leveraging planning analytics and TM1py to sort of optimize resources in their data centers. I know, Ryan, you're in a different sort of world right now at Amazon, but what's going on these days at Amazon? And are you guys using Planning Analytics Engine?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So can you hear me okay? Just making sure we're audible. Great. Yeah. Yeah. So today at Amazon, I work in Amazon stores, which is sort of everything you can sort of think about when you actually go to Amazon.com, from ordering a package all the way to when it gets on a truck and gets to your sort of front door. So we use Planning Analytics Engine sort of to do all of our internal management reporting, as well as it's sort of the linchpin in all of our planning. So everything from headcount planning to operating expenses to revenue to units, and everything that sort of is inside the sphere of FP&A sort of touches TM1 here at Amazon.
Sounds cool. So attendees listening in, Amazon is using IBM Planning Analytics Engine, and they're getting a lot of value out of it. So I think, kind of moving on a little bit, still staying on this general topic, Shane, so our region has a couple of Planning Analytics version 12 implementations on our belts. You're working on one right now. Can you explain to us briefly what is Planning Analytics Engine because the market perception is that Planning Analytics version 12 compared to version 11 is much more of an architectural advancement or change compared to, like, let's say version 10 to version 11. But what is Planning Analytics Engine to you, and why does it seem like such a revolutionary advancement to the TM1 that we love?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I would say that, the TM1 that we know and love, it's been around for a long time. There's been a handful of different companies that have been custodian to this great TM1 software that we all know and love. IBM has been the owner for the past several years. And I feel like IBM has really been making a big investment into the software, a lot of great changes. So, we'll get into the V10 to V11 transition versus the V11 to V12 transition a little bit later in this discussion. But I think that Planning Analytics Engine is really the next evolution of what IBM envisions for TM1 and Planning Analytics. There's been a trend in the past few years to move towards a more cloud native technology. And that's what IBM's doing with Planning Analytics Engine. They're introducing containerization, things like microservices and things like that to manage it and to make deployments more consistent. So yeah, again, we'll get into the difference between 10 to 11 and 11 to 12, but that's kind of.
Yeah, let's get into that actually right now. So from what I remember about version 10 to version 11, like things that come to mind were like the introduction of the REST API, which I think was a very smart move, and the introduction of virtual hierarchies. Marius, Ryan, what are some other things that you can remember being significant version 10 to 11? And then as we begin talking more about what Planning Analytics Engine is, I'd like to talk a little bit about just this trend that we've been seeing with cloud native technologies. But what do you guys recall being the key things that really changed between 11 to V12, and contrast that to what we're seeing in V12 or V11 to V12?
I'll go first, if I may. I think from 10 to 11, like you said, the biggest enhancement was the introduction of the REST API. That was huge, and that allowed for things like TM1py, for custom tools like Arc and Applico UX that are built from partners. That was big for TM1. And I think moving from 11 to 12, the architectural change, which brings high availability and horizontal scaling, I think this is huge for high availability. We don't think about it a lot, I think, in TM1, but the kind of systems that we build, I think they will benefit hugely from high availability. And it is also, I think, more and more becoming a mandatory requirement in organizations.
So
that
Ryan,
would be,
yeah. So on that high availability thread, Ryan, at Amazon, have you guys experienced Planning Analytics Engine actually achieving that kind of true high availability?
Luckily, no, because we haven't had any outages. But I think the biggest thing from a high availability standpoint is that PA Engine, really allows, really frees up engineers to do sort of engineering that provides more value for their internal stakeholders, or in Amazon speak, their customers, right? Because if I can recall, starting at Amazon in 2016 or 17, right? And we were looking at, okay, how do we have a warm backup, and how do we stream transactions out of a V11 database and replay them on a standby, and what happens if it dies in the middle of loading data, and how do I ingest the transaction log and catch up on my allocations if they didn't run on the replica in time? And there was all of this orchestration, work and headspace that you had to make room for, and it was stuff that you didn't have time to think about what your customers cared about, which was their reports and their plans and their systems, because you had to figure out, how do I get this thing to not fall over, on the off chance you happen to hit some kind of problem. And PA Engine takes that away from you, right? You don't have to worry about it, right? Because it's sort of built in. And as long as you're running, replicas to do that, it's no longer a concern.
Right. So that's a really good point to make, to say that yes, with Planning as version 12, there's ways to manage the complexity and all of that. But wouldn't it be nice to just not have to even worry about it? And that's kind of like the additional value add that version 12 kind of provides to customers. Marius, other than things like high availability, what other sort of things is IBM sort of promising or trying to achieve with the new platform?
I think the fact that you can lay it out over multiple boxes with the replicas, like lay out your TM1 instance over multiple machines, I think this is also great. Like, I think it enables for better performance, just theoretically. And I think this is an investment for IBM that should pay dividends in the future to users and developers. If you think about the potential potential that it has, scaling over multiple machines compared to just having your TM1 instance like tied to one box, I think this is going to bring performance improvements with every release of version 12 to come.
Yeah. So on things like query performance, Ryan, I know that I have a feeling that deep down inside I know that you're a very technical person, and you might have at least a good understanding of the theory of how IBM is trying to achieve better performance as far as queries go. I'm going to ask that in a second. But Marius, you just touched on the further scalability. So the fact that because of the platform and its architecture, the scalability of it is, I would say, more simple to manage in a way. And we'll actually get that. We'll actually talk about that in a little bit more detail when we get to TM1py 2.0 and how that is now supported. How that supports Planning Analytics version 12. But Shane, since you've been involved with implementations recently, based upon your experience, generally, what can customers expect to be different? And that's if they're already using Planning Analytics version 12. So like I want like everything from an onboarding perspective, developer's perspective, end user perspective. Like what should people expect to see if anything's different?
Yeah, so great question. So I would say that from an end user standpoint, anyone already on Planning Analytics Workspace and Planning Analytics for Excel, anyone using those end user interfaces, there's basically no change for you in V12. You're still going to use PA, you're still going to use PAFE, and they're relatively the exact same as V11. So that's great for end users. As far as onboarding to V12, I did start on my first V12 project last year before IBM had their MCSP ready, so multi-cloud services platform, which kind of came out late last year, I think. So the very first V12 project I was on was just on AWS. It wasn't on IBM's MCSP. So the onboarding was a little clunky. We had to sit with IBM to get the environment provisioned. But since then, we've migrated that customer to the MCSP, and it went so smoothly and so easily. Basically, they got an email inviting them to the new environment. You had to click on that, couple of clicks through naming their environment, and it was all automated. Their V12 environment in the MCSP was provisioned, and it was super smooth. So from an onboarding experience, it's just super quick and super easy.
Nice. That's nice to hear that, because we are aware in other areas where IBM is putting a lot of investment into these platforms, but actually seeing the over time, seeing the improvements to something just the onboarding as an example is nice to see that these things that IBM is investing in, like it's being effective. Like these are actual things, like value adds that they're investing in. Sorry, Shane, you were talking about onboarding, and end user experience. Ryan, I want to get your feedback too, as well, on the end user's experience from on your end. But yeah, Shane, what do you think from end user's experience?
Yeah, it was pretty smoothly, a pretty smooth experience, I would say. I guess the good thing about V12 is that you only have to invite users one time. So you introduce them into PAW, they get an email similar to PA on cloud, but you invite them one time from PAW, they get invited to the environment, and then they're added into the V12 environment. So I guess it's similar to V11, but it's again just a smooth experience.
Right, and Ryan, so Amazon does use Planning Analytics Engine, but it's a different deployment option. Can you talk about that a little bit, and also from your perspective, how users have been receiving it?
Yeah, sure. So our PA engine is running sort of on premise, if you will. So it's running inside of Cloud Pak for Data, and sort of we have some initial POC workloads running in that environment, and we still have quite a large base of V11 installs, right? So the nice thing here is it's not an all or nothing, right? Like we have applications running in V11, we have applications that we're testing in V12. So don't be too worried that this is another Amazon speak here, a one way door decision, right? Like you can try it out, right, and see how it works. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're really looking at, we're really hoping that proves out is like you said before, better query performance for our end users. With being able to have the models running on multiple servers, and basically being able to take advantage of the compute resources across all of these individual nodes. We're really hoping that that frees up some some of the bottlenecks that we might experience during peak planning or peak reporting times. When before we used to be limited by how many CPUs could you fit on a single box.
Do the resources available? So talk about query performance. Do the resources available scale automatically, or is that something you need to do? You need to do manually?
Yeah. So today, it's not automatic. However, you could make it automatic, right? So we'll have a demo of this, I think, later on. TM1py now lets you tell the server how many replicas you want it to run. So it's pretty easy to say, have a model running on one server. If all of a sudden you're realizing that you're maxing out CPU usage, you're having hundreds of queries, possibly things are slowing down. It's pretty easy to say, add a replica to this cluster, and then given whatever amount of time it takes for the database to load into memory, and that replica to report be available. Queries can then be sort of sharded over all of your replicas. So it's really easy to scale up or scale down, whether that's storage or memory or CPUs. So we're hoping that lets us both, help our users, help the user experience, but then also manage costs, right? Because no one likes a giant 1 terabyte TM1 server sitting idle over Christmas vacation. So
right. So guys, people in attendance, stick around because Ryan has a demo to show us towards the end. So stick around for that. So Shane, Ryan, and Marius, from a developer's perspective now, what's the same and what's not? So I suppose cubes, dimensions, rules, all those things are still there. What can a developer expect to be different?
So I can answer that question from a TM1py perspective. Because thanks to Ryan's work and other contributions, we've made TM1py work with V12, and we've made it work so that all of your scripts should just work with V12, except for those edge cases which the TM1 server no longer supports, such as impersonation. So, and of course, you don't log in anymore with a username and password, but with an API key. So with that small difference, your TM1py scripts should just work. And I also provided a small demo, which I want to walk you through later on.
Nice. So we're going to have 2 demos today. Excellent. So TM1py is supported by, supports Planning Alex engine, which is good. Shane and I, we have Python scripts all over the place, and it's nice to know that we're not going to have to refactor all of that. Maybe a couple things here and there, but Marius, you'll be the first one to know if we need any help. But what about things like, Shane, so things that we do all the time, like restoring backups or like that huge TM1's configuration? Like, what's different there?
Yeah, so from a developer standpoint, I will start by saying it's still TM1. It's Planning Analytics Engine, but it's still TM1. Doing development is very similar in V12 to what you're used to in V11, with a few exceptions, right? So cubes and dimensions are still there. Writing rules is still there. We don't have direct access to the file system, so we don't have direct access to the .cub and .dem files. They're still there, but we don't have access to them. But as far as restoring backups or taking backups, you can do that directly in the GUI interface, right, in PAW. So if you want to take a manual backup, you just go into administration and say take manual backup, and it will do that for you. It zips up everything from the TM1 server, including the configuration, into a compressed, zip, like a zip file, like a GZ file, I think. And you can download that to your computer. You can restore it, back to the same instance, or maybe you're taking a copy of prod and moving it down to dev. You can just copy that file over, and then right within PAW, you can say I want to restore from this backup file, and it'll do it for you. So there's no having to like remote desktop into multiple machines to move files over. You can just download a backup and then restore from that backup. So it's super easy. You can also schedule those backups on a nightly basis right within Workspace. So you don't need to write custom TI processes or batch scripts or PowerShell or anything to take backups of the data folder anymore. You just tell PAW, I want to do a backup at 1 a.m. every night, and it'll do it for you. So that's really nice.
Nice. So TM1S configuration. How many parameters are in there in version 11? It's like in 100 something. Is it the same? Are there new parameters that people should be aware of? Has it been reduced?
Yeah, so when I think about the TM1s.config, as well as TI functions, I mentioned earlier, TM1's been around a long time. It's accumulated a lot of bloat, what I would say. In V12, IBM has they've removed a lot of that, what I call bloat. So there's a lot less TM1s.config parameters. We don't have access to the TM1s.config file anymore either, but you can access the configuration in PAW. So there's a lot of configuration parameters that aren't there anymore that you don't even have to think about. So it's simpler and kind of easier to manage, less to have to think about.
Interesting. And so you touched on the fact that you don't have access to the file system anymore. So that means things like, I'm assuming things like execute command function, that's gone. But then what is it replaced with? Marius,
Yeah.
Ryan, you have?
Yeah, I'll let them. I've got my own opinions, but yeah, Ryan or Marius, you want to take that?
Sure.
Ryan, feel free to go first.
I'll jump. Yeah. So I think the lack of execute command is it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? So I think we've all, at least in our TM1 development experience, have been asked to integrate TM1 with some other system, right? Or run a Python file. That's probably the most common thing now, right? I mean, we've all been there where it's been like you write your execute command and you run it, and it goes into the ether somewhere. You don't know. Your script didn't get called. TI didn't give you an error. You have no idea what happened, right? And then you're stuck trying to figure out, is it missing parentheses or single quotes or double quotes, or is it Unicode characters, and like what's going on, and right, and like execute command was really powerful and really helpful, and it really extended the reach of the product. But obviously, in this new world of containerized TM1, running something locally inside the container doesn't make any sense anymore. So what do, right? Obviously, IBM has introduced, if you haven't heard, execute HTTP request, right, which is really, really useful. You can now make calls out to REST endpoints. So anything you can do with curl from Bash, you can do with execute HTTP requests. So so I think, like I said, there's some pluses and minuses here, right? So if you in the past had to make a call out to AWS Lambda or some SAP REST endpoint or something, right, and you had to write something in shell script or you wrote a Python connector for it, right? This might actually make things easier, right? There's less moving parts. You might not need all these random scripts. You could just call it directly. Then that's a really big win, right? But on the other hand, right, if you were executing like something on TM1py, right, execute HTTP request might be a little bit harder for you to get around, right? So and if you're working in the AWS ecosystem, right, you might put TM1py inside of something like Lambda or on another host. And then you could put something like API gateway in front of it, which exposes it as a REST endpoint, and you could call it from there. I think the possibilities are amazing. Like this opens so many opportunities for what we can do. But it also means that there's a lot of engineering work to be done, right? There's a lot of work to get all of this plumbing to work nicely together. So take that as you may, right? Like it's a lot of opportunities, but it's certainly not without its challenges.
So I am going to get into, you touched on some of the integration options. I am going to go into that sort of realm of discussion. But one thing I wanted to ask for a little bit is the save data function is gone. So that makes me think with transaction logging, there's changes. What are those changes? Shane, Ryan,
yeah,
I
think the biggest thing is you don't have to worry about it anymore. Right?
Exactly.
Like that's the best part, right? Is like you don't have to, like, before there was so much you had to worry about, like, should this be logged or not, right? And do I want to pay the price of logging this, right? Is it worth the time and the extra disk space and all that stuff? Like, and you don't have to think about it anymore because the server automatically tracks all transactions, right? To keep all the replicas in sync. And it's just one more thing that TM1 engineers and builders don't have to worry about. So
that's nice. And where are the transaction logs stored? Are they still in? It's not in files anymore, right?
No. There's a container with the database. I think it's MongoDB. But I mean, the most important thing is, like, as a user, you don't even have to query that, right? There's a TM1py supports this. There's a TM1.subscribe function, and the TM1.subscribe function lets you have TM1 send the logs somewhere else. So you can put them into a Kafka stream or a Kinesis stream or something, and have them written to S3, or there's lots and lots of options, right? Yeah.
So that makes me think. This question is from Marius. I don't know if PI currently supports like parsing JSON or anything like that, but I suppose in planning analytics engine it does now.
I think that's a big one, right? Because if we are allowed now to send HTTP requests towards REST endpoints, towards other APIs directly from TI, then we also need to be able to consume the response in TI. And from the latest thing that I know is that with the next release, IBM is going to introduce functions to TI that allows you to parse and consume the JSON that you would typically get back from an API endpoint. So I think that's it's quite important, but we look into that, and I have a little bit of controversial opinion on that function. I think we get into that when we talk about data integration more.
Yeah. And let's get into that right now. So Ryan talked about, have the execute HTTP, that new function. I know that there's TM1py. Morris, you might be the integration expert on this call. So what are the options?
And Jay, happy to answer that question, but let me just add one more thing that people should look out for when they're upgrading from a developer perspective, and that's MDX, right? The IBM has a new MDX engine, which is better. It raises much more helpful error messages, like the old one. Sometimes you would get an error messages that is just not helpful and doesn't help you find the issue in your MDX query. I think that has gotten much better, but also it's gotten a little bit stricter. So some shortcuts that we used to do are no longer allowed and will now raise an error. So this is just something that you'll probably stumble over when you upgrade, and it should be easy to solve. It's just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
In terms of
at least it tells you like what the actual problem is. So if there are issues that people come across, they'll have a better they'll be able to solve it quicker, hopefully.
I think so, yeah. And in terms of data integrations, I think that there are more options now. There's a one new option that I think Shane can speak more about. That's how we can allow to consume flat files from REST endpoints directly as data sources. ODBCIS is new, and then the new execute HTTP function that we can use with APIs. Of course, TM1py, and ultimately Atmosphere, which we dive a lot deeper into tomorrow.
Yeah. I really want to talk about Atmosphere today, but I don't want to spoil tomorrow's session. So I'll stop it there. So when it comes to like when the REST API was made available in Planning Analytics version 11, TM1py seemed to come right on time at that point. Now we're in a different sort of architecture situation with Planning Analytics version 12. What are the things that you had to do to TM1py in order to make it compatible with both, like just one TM1py compatible with version 11 and version 12?
So yes, we've had to make some changes, but I think Ryan is the best person to answer that question.
Yeah, a lot of I'll say a lot of sleepless nights, but it wasn't that bad. It was, I think the biggest sweeping change is honestly the most minor, right? Which is V12 brings a new API endpoint structure, right? So in the past, if you've interacted with the TM1 API, right, it's like the server and the port number, and then /API /v1, and then whatever you want, cubes, processes, whatever it is. V12 introduces two new concepts: instances and databases. Instances are like what you would kind of think about like admin hosts, if you will, like from the V11 days. And data instances have a collection of databases. So now when you look at the endpoint for V12, you're going to see something like /instances and then the name of an instance, and then /databases and then the name of the database, and then API V1 and whatever it is you want to interact with. So there was quite a bit of refactoring we had to do with TM1py to get it to understand that databases and instances was actually something that you needed to accept sort of when you log in. There's a lot of refactoring done on the authentication side. Probably too much to talk about. So there's a lot to sort of learn there, and then some minor changes, right? Like things around the file service and applications shifted a bit, and then we actually had to deprecate quite a few endpoints around threads and sessions, and some of the monitoring stuff we were used to in V11 is no longer available in V12. So.
Big hats off to Marius, Ryan, and the TM1py Council for contributing all of this work to TM1py 2.0 because it does take an army of TM1 nerds to kind of get these things out to the market quickly and effectively. So thanks for that. I know that Shane has actually Shane had a lot of things to thank you for personally, Ryan, because Shane, you want to bring that up at all? I think it's new functions in the managed service of TM1py that helped you out.
Yeah, so the managed services really helped out with V12. When I started my first V12 project last year, it was before TM1py was V12 compatible. I had to get very acquainted with the REST API and sending requests with Postman. We had the need to upgrade our V12 environment to the latest version. We needed to drop replicas and add replicas, things that the TM1py managed service just kind of takes care of now. So now I don't have to send raw API requests through Postman. I can use the simple TM1py functions to do it. So yeah, thanks Ryan and Marius and team for all your work to get that compatible.
Excellent. And Marius, you're not getting off the hook. You said you had a demonstration, and I want to see that demonstration. What is it? What is it going to be on?
Yes, so I prepared a small Python script that shows how we can use TM1py connecting to two TM1 instances, one on version 11 and one on version 12. And then we're using new functions that were introduced with TM1py 2.0 to read a dimension as a data frame and then to send a dimension as a data frame to another instance. So the problem here we're trying to solve is to move this this region dimension in V11. This is V11, and is the resolution on my screen okay, or should I zoom in?
Yeah, actually, could you zoom in just a little?
Thank you. Yes. So this is V11, the region dimension, and we're trying to get this across to V12 up here. So it already exists. So let me delete it so that we can recreate it. And yeah, like an interesting problem is since we can't have execute command anymore and TM1py can't run on the same box, where does TM1py run? And that's a question that I think a lot of people have to ask now. And I choose a pragmatic solution. I'm just running it in Google Colab, simply because everyone that has a Gmail address can run Python in Colab for free. It also has a secrets manager. So it's a convenient thing if you're just trying to play with Python. So what we're trying to do is visualized here in this simple image. We're retrieving the region dimension from one instance, sending to another instance using TM1py functionality. Now let's execute through this. So we got to do some imports here. We got to connect to V11 and V12. For that we need the credentials, and so we're using a Google Colab function here to read those credentials from the Google Secrets Manager. And here you can see an example of using TM1py to connect with TM111 in the IBM cloud. And down here, we're actually doing it. And then we're printing out just the server version, just to prove that we're connected. It says 11.8. So this is the connection that we're going to use to retrieve a dimension. Down here, you see how we can initiate the TM1 service to connect to a V12 instance. And again, this is just an example. Those are not proper API keys. The API keys are coming from the secrets manager. We're connecting here, printing out the server version. This one says 12.37. And now we can get to the solving the actual problem. So this one calls the function getElementsDataFrame, which retrieves the dimension in its entirety with all attributes and all the parents to each element, and it just gives you a data frame with it. And of course, you can be more selective, right? You can provide an MDX, you can select which attributes you want, etc., etc. And having that available as a data frame is really powerful in Python for many reasons. But in our case, we're just like sort of like delegating it through, sending it to V12. So we're calling another function, and both of these functions are new. This one is update or create hierarchy from data frame. So what it does is that it takes the data frame and then it updates a dimension that already exists in TM1. So it succeeded. Now let's take a look at V12. And so the region dimension has returned with the hierarchy and all its attributes.
Nice. So
That's it.
So we can think of a bunch of use cases for this. Shane, I'm looking at you. We know the use cases for this, but clearly if someone's on Planning Analytics version 11, then they're doing some kind of phased approach to migrating to version 12. This can be used to synchronize objects across the environments. But just generally speaking, this will also support synchronizing or sharing metadata if you had multiple. I'm going to use the traditional terminology, multiple TM1 instances in like your production environment. So sharing metadata and data across. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Marius.
Exactly. And let me just add that it works as well with data, right? So
excellent.
Yeah.
That code, Chris Wetzel, if you're on the call, can you share the link to that code to the audience? I think that'd be useful. Everybody always wants Marius's code. I'm asking for myself. So thanks for that, Marius. So Ryan, I'm also not letting you off the hook. as a member of the TM1py Council, or someone that I would call like a serial contributor to TM1py, what's exciting for you generally with TM1py 2.0 as it's now able to support planning analytics version 12?
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing for me and probably a lot of my colleagues at Amazon is, we like to use TM1 as a database in a lot of our products, in a lot of our financial products that we use internally, right? And many times what that looks like is that our end customers don't even know it's TM1, right? They're not using PAW, they're not using PAX, they're just accessing an application, be it a web page or a sort of a rich tier somewhere. And I think the changes in V12 make that a lot easier for us. Obviously, high availability is important, but really, now that V12 offers sort of the service-to-service architecture, right? Embedding TM1 in another application has become a lot easier for us, right? And TM1py is our SDK of choice, when we build applications that need to talk to and interact with TM1. And I think 2.0 really is the next big step, right? It really makes it a lot easier for our engineers to get there. So
that speaks to the versatility of planning analytics, which is like Amazon is using it as a service for other applications, which is really nice. Others are using it, Planning Analytics Workspace, Pathé, and it just speaks to the different use cases available that you can apply within the platform. What is your demo going to be on, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to show you the managed service. And Christian, I might need you to make me give me sharing permissions. It seems to be grayed out.
Try that.
In the meantime, I'd like to use that time to ask a question to the audience, because TM1py has evolved a bit over the years, and we've added more and more data frame functionality. So some of the functions that you just saw, they retrieve data directly as a data frame, or allow you to update metadata as a data frame. And we didn't have those in like 4 years ago. And there's I'm starting to see a pattern that more contributions to TM1py are around data frames. I wonder if people in the audience who are TM1py users, if they make use of data frames or not. So if I could get some feedback, that would be great, because we don't have a lot of visibility really, right? What people do out there. Thank you.
Shane and I do, that's for sure. Data frames, pandas data frames all the time. Ryan, you should be able to share your screen now.
Yep, just getting it queued up here. Just give me 2 seconds. And Marius, I did want to comment on that data frame side. You know, like we use data frames quite a bit as well. And I think one of the interesting things on the horizon for us is really sort of some of the more modern, you know, data frame libraries like polars and some of the things that can really handle really large data sets. And I think that's going to be really promising as we're able to get data in and out of TM1 even faster. So
I think this is maybe for the 2.1 or 3.0 release that we evaluate alternative data frame libraries, like you said, and maybe I agree. This is very interesting thing.
So let me. Can you guys see my screen? Did that work?
Yes. Yes.
You can. All right. Great. All right. Awesome. All right. Yeah. So I'm going to take you through the managed service. So on my right-hand side, I have my PyCharm editor. On the left-hand side, I have Planning Analytics Workspace administration up and running. Can everyone see that? Can I try to zoom in at all, or is that pretty comfortable?
Good for me.
Okay, great. All right. So should be nice and quick. But in order to access the managed service in TM1py, you're going to have to import it the same way that you import the TM1 service. So you import the class, and then we're going to go ahead and use it. I'm passing a domain, a root secret, and a root client. These are sort of the pseudo or the sort of God user, if you will, you know, for the container environment. And then the domain is the address to the actual TM1 manage endpoint. So let me just go ahead and I'm gonna debug this, and we can just kind of step through it so you can see what's going on here. All right. So the very first thing I did was I printed a list of instances, and you'll notice here that I'm actually running one instance. And an instance is just a collection of TM1 databases. And you'll notice if I just expand over here, I've got two databases, one not running, one running. And I'll actually print those out next. So let me just go ahead and step forward. And I printed the list of databases. And you can sort of see that here, and you can notice that Morgan test. You can see the version I'm running, which is 12.3.4, and it actually doesn't have any replicas, and it's actually not even running. But if I scroll all the way over to the right, over here somewhere, you'll notice that I'm running this TM1 testing database, and that's the one that we're going to focus on. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is that how quickly can I add a replica, or how quickly can I actually scale up my actual, you know, TM1 instance. So I'm going to go ahead and step forward. So there's a new method called manager.scaleDatabase, and I'm passing it my instance ID and my database ID. So I'm going to add a replica. So if you have 0 replicas, that means you're running just the leader. I'm going to go ahead and increase this to 2, and we're going to go ahead and execute that, and that ran. So now I'm over here. I'm going to refresh this. Let me just reload this page really quick. And what we should see is we should see that Planning Analytics is actually starting up a new replica for this database. So sometimes this takes a little bit, but it should go ahead, and we should see another replica running.
So Ryan, one of the ways that you're interacting with your PyCharm here in order to to actually execute the script, and you're making slight modifications to the code. But let's say you wanted to have an admin do this from some kind of interface. How would you implement that?
Yeah, so from a replica standpoint, planning analytics does expose replicas to you. So what you can do is most of this is available in Workspace itself. So I can come in here, I can turn on high availability mode, and like add a replica, right? So let me do that here, and then actually what I can do is I can try to scale it again from the Python side. So I've done that, and this command is the same exact command that I ran over here to tell it to actually scale the database. Likewise, one of the things that it doesn't allow you to do is to increase the memory. So in Workspace, you can change the storage, but I don't believe there's a way to change the memory or the CPUs. But Python does expose that to you. So I can actually increase or decrease the memory that's available to my instance. So you can see here it's at 2.8, which is 3 gigabytes. I'll go ahead and request it to actually scale down the available memory, and I'll bring it down to 1 gig, and it'll actually do that. So you can see here that it created a new replica, number 3, and it's actually upgrading it. Well, it's not actually an upgrade, but it's actually downgrading it, and it's decreasing the amount of memory that's available. And once that's available, it'll actually swap that one into service. So really cool stuff you can do here. One of the things that I can imagine is you're in the middle of your planning cycle and you need some more memory, or you're in the middle of a planning cycle and you need more compute power, right? You can build an application that watches your server, and if you see if it goes over 80% threshold, it automatically scales it for you, right? There's a lot of powerful things you can do here to really take some of that traditional like database administrator burden off of your team.
That's interesting. So that's you hit on that thing that I was about to ask, which was it's the automation of these things. You then mentioned you can build an application that can detect how your system is behaving or when resources are sort of running out and automatically scaling. Question.
Absolutely.
Amazon and AWS are related. So do you get like a discount on like resources?
Yeah, we have a really nice internal pricing model that I haven't been asked to build that in TM1 yet, but there's quite a complex transfer pricing planning model, I'm sure, somewhere.
Yeah. It's somewhere that you probably built. All right, yeah. So that's a nice demo. Thank you for that, Ryan. Unless there's more you have to show.
No, that's it. And all of these new functions that are available in V12 are in Python 2.0.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. So we are coming up close to the top of the hour, so I think we should start wrapping this up. I know that we could go on for another hour or so, but we got to be respectful of others' times, guys. Sorry. So I think to everyone who's considering Planning Analytics Engine, if you're a current version 11 customer, moving to version 12 is definitely an option. Is definitely an option for you. If you're a new Planning Analytics customer, I would say take a really hard look at version 12. I think that is likely the way that you want to go. That's my 2 cents. But you can also reach out directly to CubeWise. Chris will post a link in the chat where you can reach out directly to us to get more information. Marius, for anyone wanting to learn more about TM1py 2.0, what should they do?
Check out the release notes on GitHub.
All right, so Chris, please shoot that link out as well. And just a couple of housekeeping things. So tomorrow, so Wednesday, Marius and some others are going to be talking about the launch of Atmosphere, that new service that I wanted to talk about today, but I have to hold myself back. Essentially, it's another KubeWise innovation solution that's incubated here in the US, and you can think of it as like the bedrock for cloud functions. So if anybody out there is familiar with Bedrock for TM1, think of it as like another kind of bedrocky type thing. On Thursday, there will be a DevOps session that will be hosted by Andrea, also Nicholas and Rose, and Guido. And that, in my opinion, is going to be a must-see for anyone that's looking to deploy some new tools and practices and making sure that their development and lifecycle management is sort of top-notch. And also, we're going to have a member from our UK team, Ian Boltz, and he's going to go through a little bit about basically Arc Plus, new Arc Plus functionality that includes a way for you to ensure maximum test coverage over your TM1 code before you're releasing it. So it's a way to help automate testing. And then on Friday, you'll see my face again, and Nicholas and General Manager James Downey to wrap up the week and also ask that question: how fast is fast enough when it comes to loading data around planning analytics? So that should be interesting as well. Ryan, Shane, and Marius, it's been a pleasure. And thanks to everyone that's joined today's session. Hope that you found this interesting. And we will send out this recording. This obviously has been recorded, so we'll share that with you after the sessions. So as we like to say,
thank you for having me, guys.
Yep, no problem. Do good TM1, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.